Go ahead and call the school board meeting to order. Let the record reflect that all school board members are here, and the mayor will be here shortly. He's just stuck in traffic. And we will switch places when he does get here. So would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, first item on the agenda is the approval of the school board minutes dated September 14th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Mr. Board Chair,
Yes.
I move we approve the board meeting minutes dated September 14th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Jen Preble, seconded by Arthur Archie. Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Chair? Kevin?
Yep.
Mr. LaFortune?
Yes.
I'm always used to saying Mr. Mayor, so. I think my only regret about this, I mean, the notes are as good as they can be because of the lack of audibility, I guess, from the folks that were speaking in the audience. So some of that I think is missing, just from like the questions and stuff like that. I just wanted to mention that part, but that's nothing that anybody can do about.
Yeah,
So,
it was challenging. I did listen to all 3+ hours, and if you turned it up really,
Catching-
really loud, you could faintly hear some people, but it wasn't
yeah,
enough to be able to probably take notes too.
yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote. School board member Archie?
Yes.
School board member Preble?
Yes.
School board member Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. School board member Gale?
Yes.
School board member Truman?
Yes.
And school board member Johnston?
Oops, yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, that brings us to adjustments to the agenda. I don't believe we have any adjustments this evening. Okay, and that brings us to correspondence. There's no correspondence that were in the packet. We haven't received any. Okay. And then that will bring us to the public session. If anyone wishes to address the school board, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and address the school board. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public session and move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening. A little earlier in the night this time that we get to the superintendent's report than last meeting. Just a few things. As you know, teachers and staff have been doing an excellent job welcoming our new neighbors to the schools and learning many different things about different cultures and students and how we work with families. So a big thank you to everybody who's working so hard. At the last meeting, we did have a discussion about how the hotel was pausing new registrations, and those are starting back up again tomorrow. And so we're anticipating that the last 2 rounds of move-ins, I think, will be done over the next couple of weeks. So we'll be able to have a better idea of what finalized kind of student populations will look like. The Young School Auxiliary Building is in use, and the construction, as far as the main part of the building is done. We're now working on some of those smaller items like intercoms, phones, those types of installations, but we are in the building, and it's a really great space. The school department, through the DOE, we've provided the opportunity to select some mobile learning carts to support computer science, and Meg has worked with the principals, and that each school will receive 1 cart that I believe is valued at about $5,000 each. So some exciting pieces coming for our kiddos. I don't have the date right offhand, and maybe one of the principals has that here, but we have worked on arranging some flu clinics for our staff and for some of our students to be available. And you should look in the principal's newsletter for information on that. We also have a family fun night coming up at Fairfield School on October 6th from 5 to 7. We have family fun night at Young School from 5 to 7 on this Friday, October 30th. And then tomorrow at Burns School is our exercise-a-thon during the day, and they're halfway to their $5,000 fundraising goal. So good job with that piece. And then a lot of activity in our schools. Please let us know anytime you want to stop by and help out. They'll always use an extra hand.
Any questions for the superintendent? Okay, that moves us on to the chair's report. And the item that I have, I think I'm actually going to lean on Jeremy a little bit as I go through it. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, Jeremy and I were due to meet with Thorne Academy this past week to discuss a number of topics that were listed in the agenda from that was previously put out. And so I have taken some notes sort of extemporaneously after the meeting that I've shared with the board, and I was going to go through at a high level some of the things that we covered, and because, I mean, we did cover quite a bit of ground. So on the first item, which was the hot lunch program, this was something that came to us by way of some inquiries from some parents who were just curious about whether or not the universal free lunch was something that we could bring into the food service program at Thorne Academy. And the long and the short of it is that it's a fairly complicated undertaking to do that. They utilize contractors. They have more than just the lunch program. They have students on campus. So it's ultimately an extremely complicated thing to do at this time. We did talk at length about that. I think it was probably the topic we talked the most about. But that isn't to say that there is no program available. They do have a needs-based program that they do administer, and they do a job, their own identification of students that may be in need of that. And I know at this time, one of the things that was brought up was that the Board of Trustees is actually examining the income limit to see if there's a way to expand the program. It won't be universal, but it is something that they do take seriously. And that's kind of where we landed on that. The second item was the CTE funding. That is related to a bill at the state, which has to do with funding of students that also attend a CTE program. The end result of that is that at this point in time, we don't really have any intention to change the way that things are funded, but I'm sure it's something that we can bring up, when we get to contract discussion at some point in the future, because that is going to be an ongoing item. The third topic was superintendent's agreements, and this one had a lot of energy around it, and I think it's, an understatement to say that there might be some differing opinions on how those are to be handled. There's probably going to be follow-up on that, because there is definitely some desire to have more open conversations on both sides about how those are handled. So there'll probably be more to come on that. It was definitely something that there's a lot of energy around, and both Thorne Academy and, our school department, in particular, our superintendent, whose signature ends up on those agreements, have some clear interests in how those are going to be taken care of. So that'll probably come back again. The remaining items really were more of sort of status items. So we discussed main care billing, rental bus times, student data sharing, and then a couple of things that had been brought up recently around registration of students from Sweetser and newcomer transportation, specifically around after-school activities, which all take place and end after the last bus goes. So those are all areas where we had a lot of common ground, and in particular around the transportation piece. There's probably going to be some discussions to see if there's a way to perhaps stipend someone to help with that on our side. So that is essentially all of the topics that we discussed. I don't know if any of the board members have any specific questions around those. School Board Member Gale?
Just a quick follow-up on the lunch issue. So are we, I guess, is that further conversation, or is there any way that we can help them to roll that out to students in the future as we look at that?
I didn't get the impression that it was something that would be easy to fold in, and that there was not, there didn't appear to be a way for there to be pass-through money. Like, we provide, our portion of some federal, free lunch money that would cover those students. There didn't seem to be an easy way to do that. I mean, some of the things that were brought up that were challenging is not only do food services at Thornton Academy provide multiple meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the on-campus students, there's also the fact that that's done by a contractor. So it's not even Thornton Academy that's doing it, and the contractor manages all of their supply chain. So plugging in, I got the impression that plugging into the federal program with all of its own requirements meant that that had to ripple out through all of that supply chain, which was not, it didn't seem like it was something that was going to be easy for them to do. And that they were really adamant about how they're doing, their own job at that with the needs-based program that they have. But to the original question that came in through email of why universal lunch doesn't apply, the end result answer is that, they don't participate in the federal program, so it doesn't apply. They provide their own. So it's fairly challenging. I know this is a topic that's very near and dear to Jeremy's heart, and it's one that I would love for there to be a solution, but I'm not sure if there's much that we can do to help move that along. We kind of do have to rely on the academy to do the right thing. That's just my opinion. School Board Member Johnston?
Sorry. I was actually going to ask a question about number 4. But since we are on the topic of the school lunch and the situation there, I would say that my own personal history with this, when my youngest child was at Thornton Academy, it was a shock when we went from Saco Middle School with free and/or reduced lunch and hit Thornton Academy, and there was very, very little safety net for, I think, most children. I suspect from what you're saying today that the situation there is improved, but I would agree with Will that if there's anything that we can do to try and, keep kids from falling through the cracks, and I don't know what that answer is, but I would say it would be worth exploring this a bit more with them, or even with our own brainstorming. And I'm sure that Sue Morrell would have maybe an idea or two. But thank you. On the
It
other
sounded to me that the situation had improved, and even though I'm somewhat removed from the school lunch program, my kids went through not that long ago, and I have somewhat the opposite experience in that they were very happy with the food service going up to Thornton from the regular public school system. But then again, I also was not participating in that program. One of the things that they were adamant about in the conversation that we had was that there is no differentiation between students when it comes to providing assistance through the lunch program. It's not like a separate line. It's not separate food. It's, you get lunch, when you're in, participating in that program. So that gave me the impression that it actually has improved from even what I recall when I was in high school. Sarah?
Follow-up question for that. They have the same application, well, not the same application, but they have an application for them to fill out. Because I know now that I have a child that's at Thornton, they do send home a form for people to fill out that they can participate. And I think, if I remember correctly, because I read this last night, that they have, they do support the needy students, and that they were going to raise the threshold.
Right. So there is an application process, just like we would have, and the question of universal lunch is, well, what happens to students who don't fill out the paperwork? And so they have done they do their own identification of students by way of, teachers, guidance counselors, other staff members who notice things or hear of things. And so that outreach is intended to catch a lot of the students that wouldn't fill that out or haven't filled that out. So that's the safety net, from what I understand at this point, is staff identification. But the discussion around, or at least the topic being raised around exploring whether the income threshold could be raised, was aimed at making it possible to include more students under that umbrella.
I've got a question. Do we know what the income asset limit for that program is at TA right now? Do we have any numbers or anything?
No, I don't think.
I was just curious.
I don't know the answer to that. I can ask and I'll find out.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair? My other question I broached with you before the meeting, but just because I'm not sure I've entirely wrapped my mind around this, and you suggested that Mr. Superintendent might be able to help, but it was the question of main care billing.
Okay, I'll do my best. What would that question be?
Kevin was explaining to me the question about who would be billing. I guess it relates to who would be billing for main care when it came to Thornton Academy students. I just wasn't understanding that process.
So what brought that question on is my recollection was that we had a discussion about there being potentially some interest in us billing, but one of the primary challenges was the same challenge that we have, which is hiring people that we would bill for.
Correct. So the conversation started around the ability to bill for eligible students, if there were any. And certainly hiring is always a challenge, but looking at who actually was the employee based off the responsibility for the billing, because a lot of that would have to work back through our social workers, through our billing process, through our consult services. And so the discussion centered around that if there was an open position, that possibly that could be a Saco School Department employee that would be responsible for providing that service and doing the billing versus currently now an ed tech may be a Thornton Academy employee, and that this would sit on the school department side.
Thank you.
Greetings and welcome. Any last questions on the chair report?
The only thing is just to ask Jeremy for just whether I missed anything or if there was something that I did mention, but that I omitted something that was really pertinent to the items that we discussed. I think I covered everything, but just want to make sure.
I think you nailed it, Kevin, other than it was raining really hard when we went in that day, and parking was challenging.
Okay, moving on to staff reports. There's several staff reports under agenda item 9. There's links to those staff reports. Superintendent Ray, are we going to have the staff come up and present any information, or is it just for information for the school board to digest and ask any questions if necessary?
Information purposes.
Thank you. Any questions from the school board members regarding any of the staff reports that are linked into the school board agenda? Seeing no questions, moving on. Item 10, there's a board subcommittee meeting minutes for strategic committee meeting minutes of 9/14/2022. Next meeting for the strategic committee is October 12th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Finance Committee has a next meeting scheduled for today and happened at 4 p.m. today. And there's no meeting scheduled at this time for infrastructure, and negotiations with SEA will begin later this year for the Personnel Committee. Any questions on the subcommittee meeting minutes? Any updates, amendments? Moving on from item 10 to item 11, there is no old business on the agenda this evening. That brings us to new business. New business item A is new hires. In your packet, there is a memorandum, and I believe we are required, or it is requiring some school board action. Is there a motion from a school board member? No motion. There are no action items on this memorandum. Are there any questions on this memorandum for the superintendent?
I'm just happy that we found some more ed techs.
Moving on to item 12B, which is a stipend memo from Superintendent Ray. Any question regarding the stipend memo?
Mr. Mayor?
School Board Member Truman?
I move we approve the nomination of those listed in the stipend memo and issue a contract for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
Motion's been made by School Board Member Truman, second by School Board Member Richard. Any discussion? Roll call vote. School Board Member Archie.
Yes.
School Board Member Preble.
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune.
Yes.
School Board Member Gale.
Yes.
School Board Member Truman.
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item C. There was no link in item C on the agenda. Superintendent Ray, is there any memorandum on this item?
There are no resignations.
That's beautiful. That's perfect.
When there's no link, we're having a good day.
That's right. Moving on to item 12D, enrollment update. Superintendent Ray.
Trying to get the link to work. I've got. Okay, attached to the memo is just an outline of where we are based off last week's enrollment numbers. As you can see, we are slightly up from last year at this time, but it's also important to recognize that we have approximately 50-plus newcomers in our system right now, and that we have our enrollment tomorrow, which, Meg, I believe we are expecting anywhere from 10 to 15 students that will be added, and then a second enrollment the week after. And I don't think at this time we would be prepared to guess what would be in the next enrollment piece. So it's safe to say that we'll add another probably 20 to 30 students by the next time we have a board meeting on those pieces. Our student count at Thornton Academy as of last week is 868, and that includes our newcomer students. So any questions about enrollment?
Any School Board Member LaFortune, then School Board Member Truman. School Board Member LaFortune.
Just a quick question on the anticipated enrollments this coming week as to whether we have a handle yet on where those will land.
So Meg has a spreadsheet of where they're at, but again, the information that we get versus the verification when we're there in person sometimes can differ a little bit. Some of those students have selected to remain in their school of origin. But again, when they're during the registration process, that can change from time to time. So again, while we think that there may be 10 more students this week, it could be up to 15 students.
School Board Member Truman.
I just wanted to note, too, that during the school construction meetings that we've had, there's been a lot of discussion about how the population has been declining in Maine. But obviously, looking at the trends here in Saco, southern Maine in general, the population's been growing a lot. So, I mean, it's almost 100 students more than 5 years ago. So,
I would, Sarah, just caution you that when you look at 2017, that did not include pre-K students in 2017. So just, be cautious that 100 students, you do have that pre-K number going into that, which sometimes can be a bit misleading.
fair.
I think when you look at your 9 through 12 enrollments, and you can see what those have done over time, that is an indicator that you're just tending to have, your class sizes here are in that 200 range, that 180 to 200 range is where you're going to be.
Yeah. I forgot about the pre-K piece too, so I was like, that makes a lot more sense.
Because like in this, in this scenario, you're 118 kids from that piece, which would actually put us, at about 1750-ish compared to 2017.
School Board Member Archie.
You set me up perfect for that one. My question was on the 118, I noticed that was last year and this year. Is that the max building capacity?
Yeah, for program capacity size,
Yep.
we're right there.
Okay.
Any further questions on enrollment? That brings us to item 12F, a transportation memo in your packet. Superintendent Ray?
Okay, this was an item that we moved very, very quickly on at last meeting that would have anticipated spending a little bit more time on. And as we know, we talked about earlier this year that as we started to program for our buses at the middle school and high school level, it became apparent that some runs, just based off where kids lived and the population, based off prior routes, were just too high for meeting capacity levels. And we talked at the last meeting about looking at kind of the second grid that was on the page of how we would rearrange a few of those runs, move some kids around, look at how we are transporting students from the hotel and how we are transporting the students that go to Thornton Academy from Arundel, and making a recommendation to kind of alter some bus routes to make sure that we weren't over capacity, which is something that is a fairly easy fix for us to make. The other piece of our real challenge that we have is we have 3 buses that do pre-K runs only, and all they serve is pre-K students. And on those 3 buses, when you look at some of the timing, and I believe we have some school committee members who would be part of that, you have a 4-year-old sitting on a bus for an hour and a half. That, to me, does not make a whole lot of sense that we would put a 4-year-old on a bus for an hour and a half. And as I said last time, I didn't like to take a vehicle ride with my child that was when they were 4 for an hour and a half, could be quite difficult. I just can't imagine the bathroom break type situation that occurs. And so we did provide a solution where some of our regular buses that house our kindergarten through 5th grade students could accept, and we're looking at 1, 4, there's 5, 6, 7, 11 students, that if we could move 11 pre-K students onto the bus run with their buckles and harnesses onto regular buses, we could drastically decrease the transportation time for all kids. And I think that this is a solution that we should look at, because there's nothing good about having a pre-K kid on the bus for an hour and a half. As we look at the possibility of a new school in the future, if we had a model where our elementary schools are on the same site, you would be using a model that would be pre-K through 5 on a bus, because you're just going to be able to decrease ride times for all students. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is that, part of our system is, even when you look at what happens at our elementary schools that are doing a tremendous job of getting students out of their buildings quickly. Wendy, April, and Jeff and their staffs, we are moving kids quickly and as efficiently as we can, but we still have buses that, as you look at, like the North Saco piece of things, are still getting kind of a little bit late at the middle school. And our goal as we started the school year was to have a situation where transportation operated in a fashion that every day buses lined up in the same spot, in the same location, that we tried to improve so that dismissal at the middle school didn't drag for 20 minutes. And when I talked to Marie and Mike, we're in a much better situation than we've been. We're moving kids pretty fast. But if we had the ability in the future to use 3 more bus runs for all kiddos, we could be in a situation where I think we could be much more effective as a community. But this switch, we've kind of made this switch for the high school and middle school kiddos, but this next switch would be about not having kiddos on a bus for so long. So, I'll take any questions.
I have some questions. First question, I'm sorry if I jumped in and beat anybody. I would like to know, is it just the 11 pre-K kids, or are you talking all 3 buses merging? That's my first question.
It would be moving 11 kids right now.
Okay, second question. Now, I just happen to know from experience, because my kiddos, the first kid picked up on Jenkins Road at 6:30 in the morning, 6:50, somewhere in there. So my question is, are bus aides going to be on those buses supporting the bus drivers with the harnesses and the buckles and things? Because that is something that pre-K children encounter. And are those buses that those 11 kiddos are going on, are they going to include harnesses or not?
They would include harnesses, and we would have to work with families to get on and buckle kiddos in. Because again, you would be looking at adding 1, 2, 3, 4 different bus aides, and I'm not sure that's something that we could possibly do right now. What we would continue to do is to look at which buses could serve, and if there are aides that we could switch on to buses over time. But again, I think what we are trying to accomplish is not having a kid get on a bus at 6:30 in the morning. That just does not seem like good programming to me.
Okay. What about the existing bus aides on those buses? Would they be shifting to do, you're saying driving then? Is that my understanding? No.
Nope.
Where would they be I guess I'm trying to understand the vision.
Existing bus aides would stay on those routes that you'd still have bus 760 with 29 kids. You'd have bus 761, which would go from 27 to 14 kids, and bus 31 would stay with the 31 kids. So essentially, you're just moving kids off that 761 because it's such a long drive for that bus to get around that we would start working at refining that bus run.
Okay, so like that existing bus aid for like the first pre-K bus, let's say on Jenkins Road, that bus aid would then get shifted to another bus with those kiddos?
Correct. You'd be looking
Okay.
there are 4 buses that it would impact, with one bus picking up 1 pre-K kid, another bus picking up 4 pre-K kids, second bus, 752, picking up 2 pre-K kiddos, and 703 picking up 4 pre-K kiddos. So you'd have a very small number on there, and we would hopefully be decreasing their ride time significantly.
Okay, thank you.
School Board Member Archie.
So we're talking about 11 students. Without actually seeing the projected routes, it's kind of hard for me to picture this, but would it be possible with more maneuvering around that we could get those 11 onto one other bus? So then we could put an aide on that bus with that driver?
Well, so if you do that, you're actually will be taking the other situations and actually making it worse for our elementary runs, because we would now have more overloaded elementary bus runs and high school bus runs. That's part of the challenge, is that those drivers for the pre-K only drive the pre-K runs because the timing takes them out of the mix for everything else. And so unless you had an additional driver, which we know that's not the easiest thing to find, it takes more of our pool and focuses them just on those runs.
So are we proposing a drop-off location, a bus switch, or are all 4 of those buses going to be going to pre-K?
I think that was in the memo. I believe they'll be going to pre-K and dropping them there. But I would need to clarify that for you.
We're not afraid that would cause more time issues
Well,
in the
again,
future?
you have certain situations where you have, when they looked at those buses at the spin around time, as Stacy and Jeannie were studying this piece, was looking at a scenario to make sure that they were being placed on runs that are quicker to get back to the middle school. And so I don't think that they see that being a big problem.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, it kind of seems like a waste of time to have the bus go over just for one student. But like I said, I haven't seen the projected routes. You know,
Correct.
I have a logistic background. I can kind of wrap my head around it, but it would be a little easier. I am very uncomfortable with the students being on the K through 5 myself, and I also don't think it's safe to have parents on and off the bus. You know, even if it is just one or two students, I just don't think that that's a good idea.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? School Board Member Gale?
Just a quick question on the bus right, the software. Would the implementation of that occur with a potential new rollout of these routes, so that families, when they change buses or whatever, they'll be able to use that and track them, or is that later in the fall?
I mean, I think, again, the change in these bus routes is part of the reason that we're slower doing those pieces, because I don't want to give people access to several different buses and then have their kiddos switch, and now you're, watching 3 buses on your phone, et cetera. But it could be a situation where our plan was to roll out 1 to 2 buses at a time when we're ready to turn it on, so that the transportation office doesn't get flooded on day one with everybody calling, like, let's get bus 751 out of the way, and understanding that piece. Certainly in those situations, we could target whatever bus we want to have be first in that rollout.
And then just one other clarifying thing. So the 11 students, it looks like, would be out of the bus 671 route?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's that Jenkins Flag Pond bus that starts so early in the morning.
Any other questions on this memorandum?
I had a quick question.
Board Member Richard, then School Board Member Hard.
There's a number of other communities listed in the memo that, just gives example of transportation. So, in the 5 communities that have pre-K that they're riding with the 5th graders, are there bus aids on those buses, or?
In some of them, yes, as you can see, and some of them, no. We put that column in there. I know that in some of our situations, and it's a little different because we do in Biddeford, and while we have a bus aid not required, we do have a lot of bus aids on most of those buses because we operate a half-day program. And in the half-day program there, we kind of program kids by segment of town, like saying, okay, this side of town gets like the AM session and this side gets the PM session. So it doesn't require us to have 8 or 9 different bus aids because we're doing sections of town. So we're able to, work within what we have. In this scenario, this would require, if you wanted an aide sitting on those buses, you're looking at 4 different aides, and as you look into the future of how you would do pre-K transportation, if it was rolling into the new school and we're going to, one location, you would need to make that decision of whether you're going to put bus aids on every single one of those buses or not. And I think that putting a bus aid on every single one would be, while being an ideal situation, could present a lot of other challenges, from the hiring standpoint.
Yeah, I know. I just think of, like, say, the one bus where there was one pre-K student, on a bus mixed with, kids much older than he or she, is that, I just wonder how that situation would be
Well, I think that you also have to look at the fact, too, is that if you're a family that has, several young elementary students, that you have a pre-K student and you also have someone going to kiddo going to young school or Fairfield school, now your kids are all on one bus versus having two different bus pickup times or drop-off times. That can change things in a morning routine quite significantly if you are not waiting at 6:30 or 6:45, and then, when your next one comes around at 7:10, that, for some parents, I'm sure that this decision will be a difficult one. For others, it may be welcomed if you're out there with the rest of your family at the same time. And then also thinking about your drop-off routine at the end of the day, that all of your kiddos could be coming at one time versus a staggered approach.
And one more thing, we filed for 2 emergency buses. Is it something, any idea when we'd find out about that, or is there not a very good chance that it would happen, or?
I mean, we've put in for it, whether it will happen or not, and then, again, it's an opportunity for us to get state subsidy for buses. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will come with a driver, which is much harder. It's harder probably to find a driver than to get funding for a bus.
So, actually, one last thing. So the other option was changing the routes. So in doing that, it would bring us to 100% capacity. Is that, that's good that it would bring us down to exactly where we needed to be, but, I mean, with any sort of upcoming influx, it would put us back over again, so.
Yeah, I think it's hard to change routes at this point as from a wholesale situation. I think that looking at the solutions that they did with this model of changing, 11 students off one, and again, with the big goal of saying we're just not going to stand behind an hour and a half bus rides, that this would give us an opportunity to see how it went and then have those discussions during budget process next year of what would the transportation look like if all students that were pre-K rode buses, rode the regular buses, what would that drop-off look like over at pre-K center? Would it be a combined situation? Would it not? The location and the ability to bring a lot of buses into pre-K is not exactly easy, which is a struggle. But when you look at having, 15% of your driver pool only dedicated to that school, it makes it extremely challenging to run everybody else because you're looking at, when you look at a capacity of 31, 27, and 29 students on those buses, if those kiddos were spread out, what it would do for transportation throughout the entire district would be only raising a couple of, handful of kids, which we have capacity for, but you'd be bringing 3 more buses into the mix that would buffer us some of that time of, instead of having to race across the city to get back to the middle school on time, we just would be able to handle more capacity. I just think it's very challenging to think that in this day and age, we're going to be able to grow our transportation fleet by a couple of extra drivers, because that's just not the trend any school in America seems to be seeing right now. And so just looking at how we allocate our resources.
One last thing. How are the students going to be chosen? I mean, is it possible to get volunteers, or?
Well, again, the 11 students that would be pulling apart one of those runs so that we could just decrease ride time. It would all be about looking to decrease the ride time on that bus 761.
So taking 11 from there?
11 from 161.
Mm-hmm.
School Board Member Archie.
So these are numbers, they're not exactly people yet, or students yet?
Oh, they would be this. They are definitely students.
So we have already figured out who we would pull.
We know who they would pull. We'd need to communicate with families on this. And again, we don't have to do anything with this piece of it. but I then cannot, I don't have a solution for a family who calls me and says, my pre-K kid is on a bus for 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's what we have now. This is the solution to address that situation.
I completely understand where you're coming from, and I also understand, we can't put aides on all the buses. I already know that, plus the more we have, if one of them calls out, then we're in a bind, and I completely get that. I'm just kind of wondering if maybe we could do a collaboration of the two and maybe take 11 or 12 students and narrow it down to 2 buses on, say, 3 streets. Now, if we did that, then you would have the students in multiple schools on the same bus being dropped off at the same places. The students would feel more comfortable being on that bus because they would be with their neighbors and their older relatives, which I agree with you. But if we're able to take one of our aides that we already have and put them onto one of the other buses and say we split it like 6-5, so now we have to find one aide for the other bus. I'm wondering if maybe if we did a collaboration of these 2 options, that we could get the end result with people being happier.
I don't know. I'd have to ask Jeannie that piece because, it just comes down to time, miles, and where it is. And, in these situations, you're looking at moving, like I said, one kid to one bus, and that's because that kid is sitting at that section of town. I mean, when you think about one of those students, think about it this way. We're moving all of the kids off Jenkins, Flag Pond, Heath, and Spring Hill, that bus. This is also a bus that serves Franklin, Bradley, Spring, and Lincoln. And so that bus is going from Jenkins Road with pre-K kids on it, all the way over to Lincoln, Boom Road, that area. So you're having one kiddo jump on that Boom Road, Lincoln Street bus to get to school, which my guess is, we could look at a stop, but there's probably, for that family, they may be looking at as much as a 30-minute different morning time when their kiddo's getting on the bus. It'd be quite a change for some families and some kiddos that, aren't waiting to get on a pre-K bus at 6:30 in the morning.
I really feel for the amount of work that they have put into this. I know it's not easy. I don't feel that we should be splitting the kids up that many ways, is what I'm trying to say.
Of the 118 students in the pre-K program, do you know how many use the public transportation and how many get dropped off by the families?
Right now, we have 29, 27, and 31 on the bus. So you're looking at 87 students are technically signed up to ride the bus. Now, that may not necessarily mean that they ride the bus every single day. That may be some days, that may be on the way home, but that is holding a slot for that kiddo. Their family has expressed that they need bus service.
Thank you. School Board Member Truman.
Just noticing, I've noted this last time too, when we talked about this, but out of all the schools that are listed on this memo that offer pre-K, only one of them has a dedicated pre-K bus, and they have bus aides. But there's 3 drop-off and pick-up locations where parents have to go and meet the bus. They're not, everybody else has their pre-K kids on the bus. Most of them don't even have aides. So I think even if we're looking forward from now, like even to the new school, at some point these kids are going to be all integrated onto the same bus as everybody else, is the way I'm envisioning it, because they're all going to be going to the same building. Am I wrong?
Yes, I think that you would be doing that piece.
Yeah.
Because, again, it comes down to, it's a choice decision for a board.
Right.
And the choice is either to have kiddos riding on the K through 5 bus,
Right.
typically with maybe their siblings and neighbors, or have separate buses and knowing the routes and the distances in Saco, long bus rides.
Right. And I just found that peculiar that like, we're the only ones that offer a dedicated pre-K bus, but we're going door to door. Whereas the only other place that has a dedicated pre-K bus, all the parents have to drive to this particular place, load all the kids onto those buses, and then drive them to the school, which I think alleviates a lot of their logistical nightmares.
I think that, again, as I also go through that list with my eyeballs, and I
Yeah.
won't say that I'm 100% accurate with
Right.
this, but also look at those other schools and say, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Meg, but Kennebunk's pre-K programs are at all of their elementary schools. That's not in a separate location in Kennebunk. Correct? Okay. Scarborough, there's no pre-K. In Biddeford, they're at JFK at the other school. In Yarmouth, that they just added, I know they're at their schools. Westbrook is at their schools. So the other.
But they don't even offer transportation at Westbrook.
Right. No
So, like,
transportation whatsoever.
The fact that we're even offering all these things is great, but like
Our biggest challenge is that our pre-K is separate from our other buildings. It's a big challenge for us when you think of it from a logistical busing standpoint. It makes it just harder. And I can understand why the choice is made, because you're over in a different part of town. They're definitely swinging, we could not swing 15 buses through the yard at Toddle Inn effectively. So even if we do something, we're going to have to think about, if you were putting kids on one bus over the next couple of years before a new building, you're going to have to look at some sort of transfer system somewhere, someplace, whatever that is. But we have to think about what will happen in the new building. We have to think about the resources. And I think one of the other challenging pieces that comes from this scenario is that, so as we go through the winter time, as we lack subs for the pre-K run, we're basically pulling somebody from another run, if we have somebody, or letting the pre-K run not happen. Like, that's the other piece that is very difficult with this, is now we have to combine other runs. And one of the conversations we had last week as we transitioned into a new software and how you communicate with parents is that if bus 753 is the run that my kids would be on, or 714, I think it is. So if 714 is canceled today, it would be combined with another run.
Right.
And I was thinking about like just the communication system. Like, I don't need to, the last thing I need to do is to send out the 714 is canceled to every single parent via voicemail or phone call, because then we know that hysteria will come for the next day. But how do we effectively communicate with just bus 714 parents? It doesn't require Jeannie to make 65 phone calls.
right.
And then how do we easily combine that run for the next day? What does that look like?
Wouldn't it be easier just to put them all on the K through 5 buses?
Long-term, yes.
But because they're on in the
No,
different building.
with two different locations, because you can't fit
Right.
all 15 buses. Like, I'm with you.
No, I know.
And I'm
That's why I was
sitting there
like-
thinking, and I was looking at that graph at the other schools, and that's exactly where my mind went was, well, these schools are all in pre-K through 5 versus, the different locations.
And again, you don't have to do anything today if you don't want to. It was our job to put together the work and show what it would take to start solving one of the complaint problems that we have of kids that are on the bus for an hour and a half. Here's an option to fix that one. We don't have to fix that one. It works right now. Not saying it's the best. But if we're going to do something for next year, and that you're going to say, okay, next summer, Jeannie, build the system where all pre-K kids are riding on a school bus, we need to figure out transfer places, stops, and that's not a decision we can make June before we head home and then be up and running. So there's stages of decisions that need to happen. And we can provide you the information of what it would take to do that. But I certainly, again, we know we needed to address overcrowding. We know that 15% of our transportation staff is locked in on the pre-K situation. We know that drivers are a shortage, and we know that I got phone calls about why is my kid on a bus for an hour and a half? And to solve that problem of the hour and a half phone calls, this would be the short-term fix without disrupting everybody's bus run in October. And I'm not sure that's a direction that we want to go.
School Board Member Gale.
I guess just kind of following up on that, I mean, obviously it makes sense 5 years from now to combine everything and as we move forward. But right now, to your point of if we don't have to do anything tonight, I mean, I guess if it's impacting 11 students, have we done any, and we've identified who those students are, can we reach out and just gauge from them what their level of comfort is on this? Because they were enrolled and they expected one thing, and just to totally change everything on them at the last minute, not last minute, I didn't mean that, to change things like this. I guess I think I just would want to hear maybe how those families in general would feel. And to your point, I mean, if it cuts down on a child being in the bus for an hour and a half, all for that. And I'm sure if that's the trade-off, personally, I would do that. But just in terms of that outreach to those families, I wonder if we could do that, and then maybe at the next meeting we can take action. Or
Yeah, certainly we can reach out to those families and see like what their preference would be. What it then creates a little bit for us is that before we make that decision, we would need to figure out how they go from young school to pre-K and what that transfer process, or if it's one bus, or what that looks like and how that impacts our middle school times. And again, I think parents are going to probably be in very different places. Some people will say no, but if it was my child and I had the ability to cut my ride from 1 hour and a half to 45 minutes, I'm probably making that choice. But that's me, and everyone will feel. So we can reach out to those 11 families and just get a little feedback and talk about it next meeting.
School Board Member Archie.
One thing to remember, though, Will, is that it's only this year. Next year, it's going to be a whole different group of kids and in all different locations, and it could be whole different chaos next year. So just because it works with these 11 families this year doesn't mean it would necessarily work next year.
I think one of the pieces that you have to anticipate, and again, this is not just particular to Saco, this is what every school department is operating with 1 or 2 bus runs less than they had 3 years ago, is that if you have a situation here that you have 1 or 2 less drivers, say next fall or the fall after that, and you're not able to fill those slots, the data of the number of ridership probably will not change significantly. So you will need to look at a policy decision on walking distances or how you manage your pre-K bus situation, because that may give you some of that capacity back into the fold. Because at the end of the day, even though a bus with young kids will fit 72 to 81 kiddos, that's 3 in a seat. And that's the capacity, but that's not ideally what you probably want for your kiddo.
Superintendent Ray, are you asking for a vote of the board tonight?
No, I think that it's easy based off this conversation I have no problem, again, we don't need to do anything tonight on this situation. Let's reach out to the 11 families and see what the difference would be and what our solution would be to solving that problem.
I was going to say I'd be more comfortable with that option as well. More information is always helpful. So looking forward to hearing that feedback and seeing what we can do.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12G, construction update. Superintendent Ray?
Okay. We spent a lot of time at the last meeting talking about site selection and had a lot of different comments about certain pieces. Rob in Oak Point did a fantastic job kind of explaining some of the items that were before us and tried to get to a point where taking some of the concerns that were out there or comments about future development and others and put them into a one-page chart that we tried to capture. I know that at the end of the 2 or 3 hours that we had the other night, probably people had some questions about either site, and certainly we started to talk about cost and acreage and some of those other pieces. So this was in your packet here tonight to help get some conversation going, give the board an opportunity to ask questions. Rob is here. If anyone wants to ask Rob questions about either site, and looking for a situation where we can come to next meeting and make a decision on providing direction on which way the superintendent's office and Oak Point is going to proceed if we want to move the building project forward. We need to go in one direction because there's too much work to be done if we want to have any shot of making a vote by the next November.
Thank you. Any questions from the board regarding the memorandum in the packet or any questions of Oak Point? School Board Member LaFortune.
It may actually be both. So the additional land needs, have we reached out to either or both of the related parties?
We have been reaching out to the Clare piece. We have had a reach out to them. We have not had a face-to-face meeting at all. And we will be reaching out to the other party about if that site's available.
School Board Member Gale.
It's just 2 questions. One on the access road to the Clare parcel. I'm just curious on that, the 1.5 million. I guess is that just being ultra conservative there? Because that road would be very expensive for a mile of it, just in terms of like comparison. So I'm just curious kind of what's driving that 1.5 million for the quarter of a mile?
So, excuse me. So a driveway is a lot easier to build than a road. So we had estimated how far the road would be to come into the site. It was definitely being conservative, but that's what we had figured out as far as excuse me, the actual numbers, figuring per square foot, per linear foot, was a little bit less than $1 million, but we just don't know what we're going to bump into. Just like the other one, we don't know we know a lot about what we're going to bump into, but we don't know everything.
So that 1.5 is like the very high estimate of what
Yes.
you're coming in at. Okay. And then again on the Clare column, the walking and the bike access for students, it says possible future access through the Eastern Trail.
Right.
As a part of this project, can we make that just access through the Eastern Trail in terms of?
Sure. Well, the intention is that we can get to the Eastern Trail. The gist of that question was we're really we're trying to find pros and cons of both sites. And one of the pros of the middle school site was that there are neighborhoods right next door, and those kids can walk to school or ride their bikes to school. It's, according to some of the people we've talked to, it's also a detriment because do they want buses going through their neighborhoods? But then we looked at the Clare site, and the idea was we can get to the Eastern Trail comfortably. We can make sure it's a safer route than there is now. But you can get there through through the industrial park. But whether people would start using that as a means to get to school was a question mark. But all the neighborhoods to the south that the Eastern Trail goes near could certainly ride their bikes to school there.
School Board Member Archie?
So hypothetically speaking, on the Clear project, if we could not gain access to that other land, we can
Yes.
still build there.
Yes.
On our parcel.
Yes.
But how different would the building construction be itself? Like, are we talking one small building, one grade now, or?
No, I think if we had the clear parcel and we were unable to negotiate the purchase of the other land, we've actually taken a look at, could we fit the whole project on? We're not sure as far as both buildings, but we could certainly fit the state-funded project, the 1 through 5, on the site comfortably. We actually drew it with both buildings. It was really snug. Without more information, we wouldn't be prepared to show that. But the idea is that if we didn't get that other piece of land, the pre-KK could go on the young school site. I'm not sure. I mean, you could put it on the Fairfield school site too, but the young school would be a much better site because of some of the building constraints at the Fairfield site.
Any further questions on school construction update or questions for Oak Point? School Board Member LaFortune?
I have a follow-up related to the access road length. So that 1.5 on the Clare site, is that an estimate of what would be required above what might be included in the project? And is that the part that?
No, the amount we have there is a conservative estimate. So if we were just doing the one school, and it's a state-funded school, the state would pay for that.
And is that the entire length from Route 1 to the easement that's off of Spring Hill? Or is it just a portion?
It's a portion of how far we would go into the site. We haven't designed the building, so we're trying to get an estimate of how far it would be, and we just felt that the civil engineers on staff took a stab at how much it might cost to come in, but it would be a normal cost associated with it, so, as if it was anywhere. That answers your question. But yes, you would have to bring a road into pretty much any site you go into, and that would be a little bit longer than, say, what you have on Young School now. But it would take care of what we needed to do.
And then one other question related to any studies that need to be done. Is that something that we're moving on now, or are we ultimately going to wait for a final decision on which one of these we land on?
We are getting pricing on a lot of studies. We're going to run out of time as far as pulling the trigger on something. We need to have, I can't remember what the actual date was, but in order to do the traffic study, which has been approved to move forward with, we need to have it done by, I think, November. So it's something that we had to do right away. The environmental piece was a little bit more than we thought it was going to be. The new Phase 1 site assessments are more comprehensive than they were just 5 years ago. So we do have a price to do any environmental work there. And some of the work was already done.
Is it the same for both sites, or does it vary based on?
No, it's pretty much the same for both sites. It's more of a matter of how much. It might be a little bit more on the Clear side, honestly, because there was more stuff in the neighborhood. I mean, it's on Route 1, so I'm sure the price was a little bit more expensive, but not an unduly amount.
Any further questions? So Superintendent Ray, you're going to put this on the agenda for the next school board meeting to discuss, how to proceed forward.
So the next school committee meeting, this gives 2 weeks for people in the public to chew on this issue. We'll have a site selection, site inventory committee between now and then. to talk about these pieces. And next meeting, we need to have some direction so that we know which way we can move forward, so that we can have our eye on that next November ballot. We also, after that piece, would then be scheduling the straw poll on the site so that we can get in front of the state board.
And the state really would like to meet with us, the DOE, on a project, but until we know what site it's going to be, we're kind of at a stalemate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question.
School
So
Board Member
next
Truman.
meeting, we're going to be deciding which one we want to go with, and then the straw poll?
Correct.
So not tonight?
Correct. We want to make sure that everybody has plenty of time in the community to chew on these two options and come back to the next meeting so that we have any feedback or comments from the community about their preference, and then we can make a decision and then work on that straw poll piece. This will also give us another time to have a site inventory committee meeting in the next 2 weeks to discuss any of the land pieces that come up.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 12H, a first reading of policies. There are 4 policies for a first reading: BCC, nepotism; BIA, new board member orientation; BDE, board standing committees; and BDE-R, standing committee operating procedures. Is there a motion for the first reading? School Board Member Johnston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we approve the first reading of policies BCC, BIA, BDE, and BDE-R.
Second.
Motion's been made by School Board Member Johnston, second by School Board Member Truman. Any discussion on the first reading of policies? Seeing nobody seeking recognition, moving forward, roll call vote. School Board Member Archie.
Yes.
School Board Member Preble.
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune.
Yes.
School Board Member Gale.
Yes.
School Board Member Truman.
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
First reading of policies passes 7-0. That brings us to item 13, other information. There's nothing noted in the agenda. Does anybody have anything? Moving forward, there's no executive session tonight. Brings us to item 15. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
School Board Member Truman.
Second.
Is there a second? Second by School Board Member Preble. Any discussion on adjourning? Roll call to adjourn. School Board Member Archie.
Yes.
School Board Member Preble.
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune.
Yes.
School Board Member Gale.
Yes.
School Board Member Truman.
Yes.
And School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 6:12. Have a great evening, everyone.